Hey, what's going on, champs? I'm Aaron Deliosa. Welcome to an Immigrants Life podcast, my podcast about immigrants and immigration and everything in between. Thank you for listening and downloading the show, and thank you for supporting my dad.
Welcome back, Immigrant Nation. Another week, another new episode. As always, I appreciate your consistent presence every week, no matter whenever or wherever you listen to this podcast. I deeply appreciate and thankful for the support you have given me. If you have not officially joined the Immigrant Nation, you can go ahead and click that subscribe button wherever you are listening to this podcast. And another way to be part of our community is by visiting and following our social media accounts. Our handle is An Immigrant's Life. There you can see pictures, audio reels, and other things that I deem cool. And sometimes I post my face, doing things. So check it out. It is also there where you can contact me if you or someone you know is interested in appearing as a guest on the podcast. Or you can send an email to animmigrantslife@yahoo.com. Let's connect and let's tell your beautiful story. There goes the house cleaning. Now, let's talk about this week's episode. Oh, before I make the introduction about our guest, I just want to say that in this conversation, we talk about an artwork, and for the life of me, I couldn't remember that name. So now, for the one who cares, the artwork I'm talking about in this episode is entitled A Sunday on La Grande Jatte by Georges Seurat. It's a beautiful painting, and you should check it out. Now, let's talk about the real episode. Our guest this week is a true master of visual art and jewelry making. He is redefining fashion as a canvas for cultural identity. Every piece he creates is a masterpiece that goes beyond style. It's a genuine reflection of his authentic self and heritage. Join us as we dive into his artistic journey and how he beautifully blends creativity and self-expression. I think I've said enough. Let's not waste more time. Without further ado, let's get into the show. Isa, dalawa, tatlo. Today's guest is an illustrator, an author, and a jewelry artist. He used to mix materials as a chemical engineer, but now he just sculpts them together to create beautiful jewelry. Everyone, please welcome Allan Matudio.
Hi, thanks. That's an interesting intro, yeah.
I appreciate that.
You looked into my background, it looks like.
I try. I love, quote-unquote, spending time with the guest before I have a conversation. But I don't go as deep because I always still like that surprise.
Yeah.
You know. By the way, thank you for coming on the podcast. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah. Looking forward to it.
Why don't you tell the Immigrant Nation before we start where they can reach you or if you want to promote anything?
Yeah, you can reach me on my Instagram. That's where I'm most active. You can see part of my process at Allan Matudio. Or you could just check out my portfolio and my art at allanmatudio.com.
I love your art, man. You are so cool. Like I said, offline, I'm like,
Sure.
shout out to Johnny.
Yeah.
I want to meet some cool Filipinos.
Yeah, shout outs to Johnny. Johnny is a cool person in general, so.
He's cool. I like Johnny. He's very calm. He's very down-to-earth guy. Anyways, this is not about Johnny.
Sure.
Let's talk about you. Montreal born to Filipino parents.
Yeah.
Which part of the Philippines are mom and dad originally from?
My dad's ancestral background is in Pangasinan. My mom is Batangueña. So growing up, actually, I thought that, having ala or at the end of your phrases was normal Tagalog thing. But then I realized not everyone speaks like that. And I think that's great and that's special because it kind of shows how, as Filipinos, we're not monolith, right? So there are kind of different ways of speaking depending on where you are from the Philippines.
Yeah, I love that too. I just one thing I didn't like about that alae thing is they made it they use it so much on TV, it became like a like a spoof. You
Sure,
know,
yeah. Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
I mean, it's a cool thing. Don't push it too much.
Yeah.
You shared in your book, Michael. How was your
Michael.
Michael?
Yeah.
How was your childhood growing up in Côte-des-Neiges, Manila of Montreal?
uh it was nice, actually. It was nice in the sense that like I never had to think about being different.
Hmm.
It was nice in that there was a really welcoming community. Like there's a strong Batangueño community, and we often hung out with them, actually, like my parents and stuff. And to this day, like these are still like they've become my ninongs and ninangs, right? Like because of how close my family's gotten with them. Um, we would often like barbecue or just hang out all the time. Like we were playing outside and meeting other Filipinos, and it was super just nice to be in that space. It was really when I got to so I went to a private high school called Collège de Montréal, and that's when I realized how different I was to a lot of students, and they made it clear too, right? Just like a lot of microaggressions, and
Like what?
also, just being Asian in an all mostly white school, right? Like you feel it. They talk about different things, just flat out racism as kids, right? Like, so when I look back into that, and when I look at the contrast, like really appreciated Côte-des-Neiges because of how chill everyone was. Like not just even amongst Filipinos, just amongst everyone, because there was a lot of people of color. So it was just chill at the time.
Going to that private school, and
Yeah.
then you're living in Côte-des-Neiges.
Yeah.
Were your friends like from the school or in your neighborhood?
All of my friends went to, most of them went to Saint-Luc, most of them went to Lavoie, and a lot of people from Côte-des-Neiges or uptown, eventually, they go to, I don't know about now, but a lot of them went to Lavoie or Saint-Luc. And I remember asking my mom, like, why am I going to this private school? I don't know anyone there. I'd rather be comfortable with, my friends and stuff. And for them, it was a question of, like, they didn't know any better. So it was important for them to put my education, as a priority. But again, in retrospect, it's very, I don't think it's necessary to put your kids in private school. If anything, like you're just adding another layer of complexity to them. Like I know a lot of Filipinos who did well without going to private schools, right? So it was just weird. I understand my parents' decision, especially my mom's decision, but I didn't feel like it was necessary.
Yeah, I understand that though. But I think because in the Philippines, they're public and private, right?
Yeah.
And most of like, if you can't afford it, you will send your kid to private school because you can
Yeah.
learn more. You have more advantages.
Yeah.
But obviously, here in the West is a different situation, as you said, right? Did your friends give you grief about being in the private school?
At that point, I started being more and more disconnected to my friends. Right. So I just started making new friends and started seeing my Filipino friends less. Like I would only see them when there would be festivals or when I would cross them at in the neighborhood. But it's just, part of being a student and being a kid. You're often in school and you adapt and you try to find new friends. And funny enough, the friends that I made, one of them, the only other Filipino in my year, became a close friend of mine. And just other people of color, really. Like actually, Johnny's brother, William Kim, became one of my close friends.
Oh, okay.
So that's that connection.
Were you called by some Filipinos that you're whitewash?
Well, I was definitely whitewashed for sure. Like, you don't need other people to say that. Now I could accept that that was a fact, especially because of the types of conversations that were normalized in a white setting in high school,
Like what?
Um, just the type of stuff that they would do that seemed really normal. Like them going on vacation to their country house and everyone's talking about how, yeah, where did you go skiing or whatever? And I was just like, how is this a thing? How do you guys have a second home when we don't have, like, while we're renting, right? And that's fine. I don't mind. Like, that's just how we lived. I never thought about it like that. But I started thinking about it when I was in these spaces where privilege was just a normalized part of the conversation.
Did you ever go up to mom and dad and like, yo, what's going on here? How come they have two houses? We could barely have a house.
To some degree, not exactly that type of conversation, but like a lot, again, because it was private school, some kids were wearing designer or like there would be days, maybe 3 times a year, where we were allowed to wear civilian clothing, right? So people made that like a thing to dress up really, really cool or really representative of their identity, whatever that may be. So I would be like, yeah, I gotta buy this type of clothing, really nice clothing, because this is kind of the space that you put me in. Like, I straight up said that, like, I wouldn't be thinking like this if I was in a different space.
And what did they say?
They were just shocked, really. Yeah. Like, I remember wanting to get, specifically, it was a Rockefeller like sweatsuit, when like Jay-Z was obviously, and still is, massive rapper and everything. And he had a clothing line, right? Rockefeller, Rockaware actually was his clothing line. And that's probably dead now, but at the time, like, those were really expensive clothing. And I was like, man, I really want the whole like tracksuit, right? And it didn't make sense. It was easily like $300 or $500 for the sweater and pants. So yeah, and I brought that up. I was like, other people in my school get to dress a certain way, and I wouldn't be thinking like this if I was in a different space.
During those times, teenage years, we usually have a battle with our parents because we're trying to find ourselves. They're trying to impose what they think we should be.
Yeah.
Plus that, what you just said, did that add to your? How was your relationship between mom and dad?
I guess in terms of expectations and pressure. I think in like I did have a background in science, and I did have back then a goal to get into medicine and stuff, to be a doctor or whatever. But the thing is, I don't think that was necessarily imposed by my parents. I did have a genuine interest in natural sciences. Like, it sounds silly, but like, I love chemistry and I love like problem solving in that way. But once I was in that space, there was like this anticipation of me being a doctor. So I kind of get it, because I kind of decided to get into that field. But I feel like, there's that stereotype of your parents pressuring you to be a certain, I don't know, to follow a certain career. But I think the truth is, at least in my experience or the people I've met, the Filipinos I know, or the parents of the Filipinos that I know, aren't necessarily pushing us to go into these careers, the truth is they're pushing us to get a job. So it's not about being an engineer or a doctor or an accountant. It's about finding a job. And I often hear this conversation amongst other, our neighbors in terms of the other Asians or our other Asian peers. And I realize, no, we don't get the same pressure as you guys. Our pressure is at a level that is about sustainability in our households, right? Like, we don't have the privilege to learn medicine or just study engineering. A lot of my friends were working when at 16, right? Like, they were pressured to find a job, or they would work, under the table with their parents, right? Like, I helped my dad paint apartments when he was a concierge. So that wasn't in our mindset to. I know there's a lot of pressure to be nurses specifically, and I think that might still be a thing. But like for things like being an accountant, being an engineer, straight up, like, I remember my aunt asking me, "Do you think your cousin can be an engineer?" And in my head, I'm like, why not? Like, what's that mental barrier that's stopping you from thinking that your own son can't be whatever he wants to be, right? So there's already kind of like this, maybe I don't want to say lower, but just this different expectation of let's find a job, let's make money, let's try to get out of this situation where we're vulnerable. And somehow I got lucky in that I chose the program that I wanted to do. So yeah, and eventually I chose to study things that were completely separate from the norm of, a secure career, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let me just go back a little bit because I want to take your opinion about it. Why are Filipinos obsessed with nurses? Why can't it be like a doctor or something else? But nurses is so specific.
Yeah. It's a part of our history, really, right? When the first Filipinos came in the 60s, most of them did come as medical practitioners, and they were highly sought after, and it was obviously really profitable. And that kept on going to the point where, like, sure, we're looking for nurses, because there's also that whole influence of care work, right? Like, a lot of new Filipinos come in as caregivers, and in parallel to that type of work is nursing. And if a lot of people came here through that type of employment, then it becomes like a cycle of, you should go into this because we know it's successful. So it's not a question of having a preference to take nursing. It's a question of what we know. So, like, I know a lot of Filipinos that work in pharmacy, for example, or even in factories, right? Why is that? Because when you have a group of Filipinos that work, or just a community that works in a certain place, you would recommend other community members into that space, right? And it becomes just, oh, I recommend him, blah, blah, blah. So it keeps going like that. So it's a question of, our community needs to be a part of different industries. And once that happens, then we can start recommending each other into new spaces.
100%. Like South Asians, most of the South Asians are truck drivers now.
Sure.
Like
I don't know, but sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I see. Like most of them are South Asians because, like you said, like one succeeded, and like, oh, this is very profitable. Why don't you do this too?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I agree with that.
If you're looking to find a job, right? First and foremost, if you're looking to find a job, not to follow a specific career, but to find a job. Mm-hmm. If someone suggests a job to you, right, then you would just try to get that job because that is your goal, to find a job. So there's different layers of that, but at the end of the day, it's a question of like, what is our community? Like, where is our community? What industries our communities are? And because we're so prevalent in these industries like retail, and at this point there's a lot in infrastructure too, and I guess that includes truck drivers, because I do know Filipino truck drivers. We're gonna keep recommending ourselves into these spaces, right?
You think that's helpful though?
For people who want to find a job, then I'm not gonna judge what you want to do with your life. So if you want to find a job and you get a job in this industry, then you've accomplished what you wanted, right? But when it comes to a person that wants to get into a specific field, then it's not helpful for them, because then you get tempted between, do I want to follow what I want to do, or do I feel the pressure of finding a job with respect to the needs of my family?
Yeah.
So that's when it becomes difficult. But if your goal is to find a job, take that job, right? But if you want to be, I don't know, if you want to be a doctor or an engineer or whatever, maybe you should, negotiate and I'm not going to tell you what to do because it's so complicated, right? Like, we can't just negotiate with our parents either. Like, it's a complicated dynamic. So, but it's important to keep in mind that, like, you can get sucked into these things if you're not if you get just sucked into these conversations of, you need a job, you need to put your career aside, you need a job, blah blah blah. It's tricky.
For sure. It is tricky because some people like, just follow your passion. Like, you don't know my life.
Yeah.
Maybe I have to feed like 3 kids and then I have to send money to the Philippines. I can't
totally
just be like an artist.
Yeah, totally.
And it's a hard job, as you know, right?
Yeah.
Let's change up a little bit. You mentioned that you got into chemical engineering and nanochemistry and analytical chemistry. I don't even know what that is. You're too smart for me. What did you do there?
Specifically, I graduated in biochem in Concordia, and I did an internship at a research lab, in a forestry research lab. And what I did in that lab was nanotechnology. Eventually, I got laid off because in the government, they weren't supporting research programs as much. So I went back to school and studied chemical engineering. So yeah, I guess that's my history when it comes to just natural sciences.
Oh, you always like chemistry?
I like it because of logic and the problem solving, and knowing some chemistry, knowing some physics just allows you to get foundation in how the world works, Just having slight knowledge of chemistry helps you understand better about plants or rain, like really everything, everything, the basis of everything, right? So
yeah, for sure.
So yeah, just the truth is, I like learning, I like studying. I wish I was still in school, but I gotta live, right? So I gotta work. But like, if you told me that, yeah, Allan, I could pay for your school, I could pay for your life, just go back to school and learn, I'd be like, yeah, I love that shit. Like,
Really?
I still go to libraries to like take time to work on stuff, to learn.
Oh, very interesting. I love people like you, man. Like, so focused on things. Like, I love learning too. I do.
Sure.
But you're like a different level learning, Like, you can actually like make bombs and shit like that, Make drugs if you need to.
Sure.
Positive and negative.
I know what you mean. Yeah, I like I don't know. I like puzzles and problem solving and stuff like that.
I like
the
puzzles too, but you're a different puzzle solver, okay?
Sure,
I know jigsaw puzzles. You know what I mean?
Sure.
You mentioned earlier that you thought of thinking maybe you'll be a doctor or whatnot.
Yeah.
What did mom and dad say when you finally told them, like, hey, I want to do chemistry instead of being a doctor?
Yeah, it's tricky because it was kind of like a gradual change, to be honest, because I didn't have a chance to get into pre-med. Like the truth is, I didn't have a chance. So the idea was to go into biochem, which I did, then have good enough grades to transfer into medicine or pre-med. But that was more like a goal for me. And when I realized that I wasn't able to, because the grades to get into there is pretty intense. Like you're basically a perfect student, including like volunteer work and everything, like, and you're competing with international students. It's fairly corrupt system. So like, what are your chances?
I want to know.
I don't know enough to talk about it. Like,
okay.
But yeah, so I started like being more realistic. So it went from that dream of, to be honest, it wasn't even a deep dream. It was more like, oh, this is a cool career to be a doctor. Like I never dreamed to be a doctor. Like I grew up with anime. Like unless Goku was a doctor, I don't care about being a doctor. You know what I'm saying? Like,
hells yeah, man. I'm a wave, bro.
Yeah, if there was a class on being a Saiyan or learning, turning super, I'd do that, right? So it wasn't a real dream. So for me, it was, at least for my spirit, it was okay for me to gradually be like, okay, I'm not gonna go into med. Maybe I could try to go into pharmaceuticals, because that's like fairly similar in terms of like healthcare and stuff, or just health or biochemistry. Like it's not a crazy jump. It's a lot of like recurring themes and concepts. But then I was like, man, you kind of like med, you needed to do an exam, and like it's still super competitive. So I just got comfortable doing research. And like I said earlier, like I enjoyed just being in the lab and like experimenting and stuff. So I was really happy with just doing research, to be honest.
So from that, being a chemist, studying stuff, to video game illustrator.
Sure.
Speaking of a big jump.
Yeah.
How did that happen? What happened?
It sounds like a big jump, but to me, it wasn't, because while I was doing the chemistry work, I decided to study drawing and illustration and digital painting as though I was back in school, right?
Wait, is that like your personal, you wanted to learn, or like it came with the school?
So I was in my career now as a scientist or whatever, right? As a research tech. And in my part-time, I made genuine effort to learn art, right? And I think because of my technical approach to learning, that got me far into video game illustration. I was also really lucky that one of my teachers in art was also, he himself used to be an engineer. He used to be a computer engineer. So the way he would talk about painting or illustration was very technical, and I can relate to that. Like he would be like, the reason why we have this and the reason why this is so bright is because this creates a read that makes your eye follow this, right? There are rules. And once you started understanding the rules of illustration, it was easier for me to grasp, because before that, before this specific teacher, or before this specific program, like illustration program, a lot of art courses was about draw how you feel or copy this, and they weren't really technical. It was just like feely, and that's fine. It's not for me, right? Like for me, it needs to be technical. Like if you're gonna tell me to draw a box, don't tell me to copy how you draw a box. Tell me why you drew the box this way. And if you tell me this is how you felt it, I'm not feeling what you're feeling. I need to know exactly why this box is drawn this way. And certain teachers were able to break that down.
So I like what you said. That you said, okay, show me how to draw the box, and I'll draw the box. But people could say that, well,
No, for me, it's not even that. For me, it's why. Why are you drawing the box this way? And if you tell me this is how it feels like, that's not good enough. But if you tell me that I drew the box like this because the point of horizon is here, and then you have two vanishing points leading to this point, and that creates the corner of the box. And because it's a box, the edges are equal distance to each other. Then every single element of that box is accounted for, then I can believe you. But if you tell me it looks right, that's not good enough, right? So I got teachers that were like, no, this is how you draw the face, because when light hits a certain angle of your face, it becomes shiny. It's not because your skin is oily. It's because at a certain angle, you get the Fresnel effect, right? So because I met these really technical artists, I got to relate to them. And I saw that this field of art is not just about how things feel. It could be extremely technical, right?
Now, going back, that's beautiful. Now, going back to what I was trying to ask is, people will say, how about those people that says, this is how you feel? Like, because people
Sure.
could say that, art is how you feel. Like,
Yeah.
so how can you draw an Allan box in you that you could put your quote unquote heart and soul?
Yeah. The thing about my work is that I am conscious that my art is a reflection of my experiences. It's a reflection of my influences. And Allan art is nothing without Akira Toriyama, or without Studio Ghibli, or without Filipino artists like Bastinod or Jap MK. So if you tell me what is Allan art, I could break it down for you in a very technical way, just like how people have told me how to break down illustration. Like my art tells the story of Montreal Filipino community. That's not something that's super feely. It's like grounded, tangible experiences. The way I draw my characters is a reflection of, or it's the product of me looking at pictures of my cousins, right? My cousins have this nose. This is the nose that I'm drawing. This is a Filipino nose. It's not a question of, I feel like the nose should look like this, or this is what Filipino is. No, I don't care what you think Filipino is. My cousin has this nose. That's the nose for this character. So everything is like, I'm accountable for everything that I draw, everything that I put there, I can explain, because I'm not just feeling it. It's also just real. You know what I mean? Like it was referenced from something.
Yeah, I love that. There's this, whose artist was that? What's his name? He drew this like people in, I think it's in France, and they're at the park just looking at the water. I forgot the name.
Okay.
Anyways, so the idea, and it's like he put dots to create this painting. Like it took them a year or two to put the dots.
Yeah.
And there's a science behind it, because every dot is beside another dot that is affected by the other color, by the color of the dot.
Yeah.
Forgot the name, but like I love that shit. I love learning about art in that sense, like what you're saying. And not just like, I felt like drawing an eagle.
Sure.
Like, but
like,
how?
But don't get me wrong, like that's completely valid. It's just me as an artist, everything I do is super technical, potentially to a fault, because I want everything to follow in steps. And because of that, my work tends to be a lot slower. So yeah, it's just for me a different way of working. I have more of a technical approach than a feely approach. And if you feel like my work has a certain feel or vibe to it, everything is intentional. Like there was a conscious decision to make the line curve or to make the line straight, to make the head this size or that size, the nose, the eyes, everything has intention.
Do you paint?
Oil Or acrylic? No, it's been a while. I guess what we do with the computer is called digital painting, but it's not the same, obviously.
Speaking of digital painting, what's your opinion about AI art?
Well, that's a huge conversation also. In what sense? Because that's a huge conversation.
Well, let's start with how it's gonna affect art in the future. In a sense, like painting, a great example. Anyone can do quote unquote art now. Just type in some words on what I don't know what they use, but especially with your work.
Yeah, I think a big part of art, or at least my experience with art, there needs to be an artist, and no matter how artistic and no matter what your technical capabilities are, there needs to be intention. So the AI is able to reproduce images, but if those images are art or not, I would say they're not, because how you put the light and how you put this dot and the combination of how certain shapes are put together was not was not necessarily an intentional thing. It was a result of the average of how they're meant to be put together. So if you told the AI to do a painting of a cat, it would just average out what a painting of a cat looks like and present it to you. But if you as a painter somehow made the ears of the cat 1 centimeter bigger, and that was by design, then already the AI wouldn't think of doing that, because it's not within its program to think outside the box in that way. You still need to give it specific commands. Like I recently saw something with Lil Wayne being interviewed about how AI has like been making music that's Lil Wayne. And Lil Wayne was like, first of all, he doesn't care, because he just makes music. He's always in the lab. He's always in the studio. He's just rapping all the time. But when he was asked that, he was just like, it's impossible, because he's so, he brings out something. Well, this is what he said, right? When he brings out something new, the AI can't keep up with that because it's new. So until this input exists, you cannot replicate the artist, if that makes sense. So right now, the AI might be able to copy my art, but until I decide to change how something looks, the AI can't simulate that, right? Because it didn't exist before I created it. So there's still that very important element of the artist, because we keep pushing the boundaries and the AI is just able to keep up with it, right?
Yeah. So
Because,
Go ahead. Sorry.
well, because if, for example, if somehow the AI imagines being creative, like let's copy Allan, but Allan in 10 years, right? How can the AI foresee how my art looks in 10 years? You know what I mean? Like within me now and within 10 years, something can happen to my life that can completely deviate my artistry. So when it comes to AI, unfortunately, you can't get something creative or new. It's just it has references. So sure, you'll get really pretty pictures, and people are probably able to monetize these pictures. And I think there is value in AI, because, to be honest, a lot of people in my industry use AI to think of ideas, or to visualize some ideas. So it's going to be a part of the way we work, but it's not going to replace the artist, in that it's still up to the artist to take it to that next level.
Yeah. Do you think there'll be a day that AI will replace all like video game illustrators and whatever else, because you know how companies are, they're
Yeah.
trying to save money in the end,
Yeah.
right?
I think it's super possible for AI to replace anyone, really, because at the end of the day, if you're a company, if you're a corporation, your goal is to make money. If your goal is to make revolutionary video games, like games that change the face of video games, or like really amazing IPs of a video game, you're not going to use AI, because you need that really creative personal touch in your work. If you're a super generic company, sure, go ahead, use AI, because your games are already generic and boring and mainstream and monetized. Like, we don't expect you to revolutionize the game. Sure, go use AI. You know what I mean? But if your goal as a video game company is to create innovative games that'll push the boundaries of gaming, no, AI can't replace the people.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, if you want to make the next Candy Crush, use AI, right? If you want to make the next Mario, use AI. Those things exist. We know how those games work, right?
Mhm.
But if you want to make, I don't know, what's a really dope game?
I haven't played video games in like decades.
Sure, but I don't know, like a good game like Elden Ring or God of War, you won't be able to just AI that, or to AI the level of change they brought to the industry, because before them, those types of games they weren't at that level.
Yeah. AI doesn't have the capability of the creativity of an artist.
Yeah, I would say that. Like, AI can't push the boundaries, because at the end of the day, a human needs to decide if what the AI did is good enough. You know what I
Love
mean?
that.
Because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, you could be like, okay, make a game about this, make a game of that. Then boom, you have 4 options of a game, or 4 options of an illustration that was created by AI. At the end of the day, it's up to you to decide which one you want to present. So there's still that human component to it, right?
Yeah, 100%. I love that. Let's change up the topic a little bit. This is
Sure.
one of the fascinating thing about you, jewelry making.
Okay.
How did you get into that, and how long you been doing it?
How did I get into it? I've been doing jewelry stuff for a while. I started taking it seriously 2 years ago. That's when I started taking a course. But I made jewelry might be like 5 years ago, because I knew how to model in 3D. So my first piece was actually fan art, really. Like, I made like a ring of like a Pokemon design, or a ring about like Studio Ghibli things. And I modeled it in 3D and got it printed. And when it came back, like, that was my first set of rings, like they were designed in 3D. Ultimately, the reason why I started making jewelry is because I think jewelry is cool. Like, it adds a lot to like your style or your personality or your identity. But most importantly, it's because I was looking for things that I actually cared to wear, or stuff that was meaningful to me. I found that a lot of jewelry in the market, like, are like generic, or had symbolism that I didn't care for example. So I wanted to create pieces that reflected the research that I was doing, or the history that I want to share with people. So it was really like that. There was really a specific moment when I was walking in the subway or in the metro. And like, you know how they sell like rings and sunglasses and like all, and I like looking at them. I'm like, okay, what's cool here? And as much as I wanted to get like, buy something or wear something, like, I want to have something to, I don't know, to be cool. I don't know, whatever, right? But nothing made sense for me to wear. Like, it didn't reflect the stuff that I cared about. So one of the first, like, in fact, all of my pieces, starting from 2 years ago, it's either about learning the basics of jewelry making, so just basic practice, or has some kind of influence from Filipino shape language.
Yes. That card that you made, yo, that's fire, bro.
Sure. Which one?
The
chain?
necklace chain that
Yeah.
the ka, the symbol ka.
Yeah, man. Yeah,
Yo,
thanks.
that is so clever. I'm like, yes, it makes sense. They link together.
Yeah. It's genius, right?
It is. I'm like, yo, that's amazing. That's one thing I love about artists. Like they can, like you talk going back to, about the AI. Like they don't have that thing that they can
Yeah.
think of that.
Well, AI doesn't even, another thing about AI doesn't know very specific things like that, right? Like if you told it to do a ka necklace, I'd be surprised if it knew babayin first of all, right? But like I tested out Filipino, like common Filipino things into the AI, like you know those like those ice cream carts in the Philippines,
Yeah,
right?
Salvatero.
Yeah, like you
Yeah.
put it in bread and whatever, and like it's a very specific cart design. If you wrote Filipino ice cream cart in the AI, it's not gonna give you what you have in your mind as a Filipino ice cream cart. So there's still these limits to very specific cultural things, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, like for me, I made that ka necklace because obviously I'm deep into learning about the past, and Babayin is super fascinating. And I was just thinking of like, because there's something called the Cuban link, right? And it's funny because it's not even from Cuba. It was designed in LA, but potentially from Cubans. I'm not sure exactly. So I was like, what could be a very like truly, genuinely a Filipino thing,
Yo,
right?
that's another level. That makes more. Yes. I love
Like,
that.
yeah, so I was thinking the ka link. And to a person who knows Babayan, it sounds a bit redundant because ka, togetherness, and
Okay.
link.
I love it.
But it works, right? Like it's logical and it works.
100%. It
Yeah.
like I said, when you like, because I was looking at the video and the pictures, I'm like, okay, how did they connect it? And like, oh my god, now it looks like a chain, but it's
Yeah.
actually ka, the symbol.
Yeah.
I got into by buying like for a while now. I've been
Yeah.
doing it. I create my own calligraphy.
Okay.
But I put it on my recycle paper,
Okay.
and then I'll put the babayin on the paper.
What do you mean, to practice or to,
No, just
to
like,
make your own style, or?
yeah, just make my own style.
Okay.
Speaking of style, what do you think about illustrators or artists or calligraphists that changes the shape of the letters? Like, of course, we're trying to show people the other culture that, hey, we have this thing, but once you change it up, it's harder to learn more. Should we start with like the basic shape and then move on, or do you think?
It's really up to you as the artist, right? As the person writing and stuff. But I think this comes with Filipino diaspora being a time capsule. A lot of the conversation often revolves around how to keep it authentic. And as you mentioned, when you go back to the Philippines, they're not even thinking about authenticity. They're thinking about elevating it, right? So in my head, I do this with a lot of Filipino, just like imagery. Like even for aswang and stuff, like I interpreted it my way because Filipinos back home are interpreting it their way, you know, like, and it just gives you the liberty. Well, it gives you the ability to use Filipino things into a space that is relevant to you, right? So if I were to show Babayin in a very dry way, like super simple, basic way. Like when you draw an A, it's a triangle and blah with the line, right? But if you showed the A in graffiti format, in a very graphic format, it's already cooler, right? So if your introduction to Babayin is in a way that is stylized, to me, that's fine, because at least now you know Babayin, right? And it's up to you to explore that. And if you realize, hey, actually, Alan's way of writing the ka symbol doesn't make sense, good for you, because you learned that the way I'm writing is different, right? So when you're at the stage of being able to criticize my work, then that's great, because it shows that you looked into it. And that was like part of the purpose of putting out a lot of our pre-colonial history, right? Because a lot of what I want to show is pre-colonial history. Like, as much as it's cool to have 3 stars and a sun, that can't be the extent of what Filipino shape language is. Like, just because you put 3 stars and a sun on a t-shirt, sure, it's a Filipino t-shirt now, but there's more to it than that, right? We've had a history of different designs and shapes. Like, just dive deeper into your history. And that's when it gets hard. That's when it gets hard, because it's a process, you know? It's a process. When you start looking before colonization, you can't just look at what is Filipino. For me, I had to look into what is Batangueño, or what is, right? Because it's not Filipino anymore.
No.
You're being specific. You're being intentional about your actual history.
How do you decide on what you want to create? Do you have a plan, or it just comes to you?
A lot of it has to do with like my environment, right? Like, and the stuff that I consume. So it's not a question of like what I want to create. It's like when I have the time to create things. So I want to create a shit ton of stuff. Like, I want to create a shit ton of stuff, but like, it's not a question of choosing, because I do want to do all of that. It's more a question of like how to prioritize. And I also want to collaborate with other artists that do the same thing, because like there's something really special about just seeing the impact of other artists into your own craft. You learn new ways to do things, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like training. You need a training partner.
Yeah, totally.
To elevate yourself.
And you it's nice to have someone that keeps you accountable to certain decisions, that advises you when you're not sure, right? Like, it could be silly things like, should I put a rock here or should I not put a rock here? Like, what looks better? Do we make the ka big or do we make the ka small, right? Like, so just to have like a second opinion is really cool too. And to be honest, in most of my work, there's so much back and forth, because what's important for me is that my story is clear, right? Like, what I want to convey, the messages I want to convey is clear. So if I have any doubts, I'm not someone working in secret and want to surprise people. I want to be like, guys, does this make sense? Like, is this problematic? Like, I want people to see my stuff and feel like, yeah, this is dope, as opposed to if even there's a slight element that's like gives like potential bad feels to a person, like, then I got to rework it because I didn't think about it deep enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but you're the artist.
But a lot of it also is about maintaining the type of messages that I want to do.
For you personally, yeah.
Yeah. So if my whole thing is about decolonization, right? But I have a police officer as my main character, it doesn't make sense. Like, there's competing thoughts there, you know what I mean? So I need to always check with people to make sure that my stuff is just consistent, because that's important. At least for me, that's super important.
100%. Kasama, the book. Where
Yeah.
can we purchase this book? I'm trying to look for this book.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think we have it in the West Island.
Bro, come on, man.
It's in a few bookstores downtown. It's in
Okay.
Drawn and Quarterly.
Oh, it's still there? It's available still?
Drawn and Quarterly.
All right.
Usually they would email me if it's sold out.
Okay.
So we actually restocked them a few times, which is pretty surprising. Like, it's cool that I have this book, and it's pretty cool how people reach out to me and tell me, like, or when I see reviews about it, you know, like, it's been, I guess, 2 years now, and like, I'm not pushing it as much as I am now because, you know, there's other projects and I'm busy, and obviously I love the book. I would love to push it. It's just we're busy. So when people still reach out and tell me how they enjoy Kasama, despite not promoting it so heavily, like, it's really nice to see that people still vibe with it, you know.
100%. I love that idea that you were disconnected to your culture, and then to get this to connect back, you decided to come visit the Philippines. Was that the first time you visited?
It was the first time I visited as an adult. And when I visited the Philippines, I was already volunteering with a few Filipino organizations in Montreal. So when I went to the Philippines, I had a totally different perspective of just the history and tourism and just revolutionary movement. So I was more aware of these things. So when something that even slightly alluded to that when I was in the Philippines was more impactful, you know, like, my goal in the Philippines was not to go to Boracay and see what, like, oh my God, the beaches here, really inspiring. I want to represent how beautiful the beaches of Boracay is. No, like, it's not about that. Like, it's about, and to be honest, at the time, I didn't know what, I wasn't necessarily looking for anything. It was just things that I experienced, right? Like, one of the scenes in the book, the character was with a bunch of tourists in this van. And that's a fairly common thing that happens when you are doing tourism in the Philippines. Like, you share a van with different people so that you could go from one location to another. And I had the experience of being in a van with a lot of just white people. And the way they would talk about the country was like, man, that's kind of messed up, because sure, I'm a tourist like you, but I also have Filipino heritage. So, like, the way you talk about it makes it sound like it's your playground, when really, like, why are you thinking that, right? Because you spent money, you feel the entitlement to use the Philippines as your playground. No, this is people's homes, right? Like, so I was more conscious of these types of conversations, and were a lot more triggered to, like, really fucked up things, you know, that people would say.
I love that you said that. You know, TikTok and social media, right? What's
Sure.
your viewpoint regarding those influencers that's, you know, primarily Western countries, people that visit the Philippines, express enthusiasm about amazing aspect of the Philippines? Do you think that's a problematic thing, or is it helping us introduce our country to other people for them to come and be tourists and, you know, help the economy?
I don't give a fuck if people visit the Philippines as a tourist. The fuck would I care, right? I don't give a fuck. Tourism is really fucked up in the Philippines. Tourism fucked up Boracay. Tourism is fucking up Palawan, right? Tourism is fucking up our resources. Like, our country was not made as a tourist destination. Our country has history, has value, has depth. It's not just tourism. So I really couldn't care less if less Filipinos less white tourists, or just tourists in general, visited Philippines with that intention. If anything, it would push the government to think of properly approaching their economy and not make it so foreign dependent.
Yeah.
Because we are so dependent on remittances and tourism and just not necessarily just Western influences, but like just foreign and just neighboring countries too. Just let's work on building on the Filipino people first and foremost, because like they live there. They're the ones struggling, right?
100%. I grew up there, man. I
Sure,
grew up
yeah.
poor. Like,
Do you think I care what the white person thinks of the Philippines?
I hate that shit, dude.
I don't
I
care
fucking
what you
hate-
think.
Like, hey
Oh
guys,
yeah, I went to the
it's,
Philippines.
it's so cheap
for-
here. Yeah, no shit, Einstein.
Yeah,
We're
sure.
dying over here, bro. Get out of here.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I hate that. Like, oh my God, it's so and like what you said there, I don't want you to come, to be honest. I don't want you to come because you're gonna fuck up the place. You're gonna throw garbage and shit. You know,
yeah.
leave it alone. You know, we have beautiful resources, we have mountains, we have beaches. Leave us alone. We're not Thailand. Go to Thailand if you want to do those stupid things.
But that's the thing, right? Like I feel bad for our Thailand brothers, our Southeast Asian brothers, because like that white people got tired of Thailand and they're going to the Philippines, right? Like I met tourists tell me, oh yeah, I was in Thailand and we visited these beautiful islands, and once you see it, you've seen it all. And I'm like, so why are you telling me this? Like, why are you showing off your privilege right now? Like, I went to Thailand, I've seen it all. I don't give a fuck, right?
Yeah, I know. It drives me nuts, this social media that, you know, like, oh my God, it's so beautiful here. Oh, yeah, we know that, dude. We know that. But we don't need you to be here. Get out of here.
But like a big part of it is also just our government. Well, not our government, but government in the Philippines encouraging that type of behavior.
Oh, for sure.
If like we're giving out the perception of being really welcoming, accommodating, accessible, because a lot of Filipinos speak English, right? So when the conversation needs to be about how to improve the economy outside of foreign dependency.
Speaking of politics,
Sure.
I saw that you did that Bakit Silen.
Sure.
It's what was it? Can you please explain what it was exactly?
It was a short comic strip that helped promoted at the time. Lenny was actually the vice president to Duterte, but at one point her politics was so different from Duterte that like people don't really notice. She was kind of just like doing her own thing at that point. But at that time, she was campaigning against Marcos. And Marcos has their own controversial history. And to me, Lenny was more of a appropriate candidate. So I worked with Mila Banco previously. Mila is also a writer, and we were a part of like this online exhibit that spoke about different neighborhoods in Canada, like of Filipino diaspora. And Mila is connected to an organization in Negros that wanted to promote Lenny Robredo for presidency, right? So when they brought up this project, I was like, man, this is pretty cool, but like there's so little time, it's so much research. I decided to do it because like it's at the end of the day, this is really important work. So I decided to do it, and it's probably the piece that is the most distributed that I've ever done. Granted, it's like a small campaign thing, like it's like 4 or 6 pages, but like it was distributed. I don't even remember. Like at least I'm looking it up now. But they made hundreds of thousands of this that was distributed, right?
Wow.
And it was all like through donations and stuff. And I was like, holy shit, this is crazy that this work was able to be disseminated that way. Yeah, so super happy to be a part of that project. Because like what's most important for me is potential transformative change for the country. So yeah, actually, okay, so we're reaching over 50K.
Woo!
Pretty crazy. Yeah.
Not
Obviously,
bad.
I didn't make money out of it, and the exposure is very like zero. But like it's really the duty or that wanting to make that difference,
Yeah.
And it comes with the work. A lot of work comes with not necessarily being acknowledged. At the end of the day, you did it because you think it's important, right?
Yeah. Were you upset when she lost?
Oh, it was a whole thing. Yeah. I wasn't surprised. I was happy to see the turnout. I was happy to see the pink t-shirts. Like I went to the Philippines recently, a month or two ago.
Oh, okay.
And you could still see Lenny murals, right? Like her impact is still represented in art and just going down the street. Like there's still a lot of like Lenny memorabilia, I guess. So it was cool to see that there was a movement. Like there was a change in people's mind.
It's helping, but
yeah, it's like it's everything, right? It's always small steps. Like
of course,
it's a question of time. Yeah.
Were you surprised that Marcos won?
No.
Yeah, same here. And I knew that too. Like years before, I knew sooner or later
he was gonna come back.
He's gonna come back. Yeah. No, I like when they came home, and then they start running for office and they start winning. I'm like, this is gonna happen.
Yeah.
This is gonna like sooner or later. And then plus with family members and friends growing up in the Philippines, they'll talk about how amazing it was that time. With Marcos, it was peaceful and whatnot. I'm like, yo, no, it wasn't peaceful. Like, I love talking to my dad about this because he grew up during the martial law. Yeah. And like, how was life? Like, was it good? He says, well, it was quiet, it was peaceful, but apparently they used to have a store, and the soldiers will just come in and just take whatever they want to take.
Sure. Yeah.
And I have a family member that she was a teacher. And I said, how was that? Like teaching history and whatnot.
Okay.
How was it? I'm like, well, they won't bother you if you don't say anything else against the government. Oh,
yeah.
I had a family member.
I'm not surprised. Yeah, I figured.
Yeah, I had a family member that was closely connected to the family of the Marcos.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, they were nice. They always give us food and whatnot.
Yeah.
Yeah, but overall, that's the problem, right?
Yeah. I think that's the thing. There's a lot of like small experiences like that, and like it shouldn't cover up the blatant, obvious theft and atrocities that were done. Like this is not just. It's funny because Filipinos love the West so much, but the West thinks we're messed up for voting in Marcos. You know what I mean? Like the West recognizes Marcos being messed up, right? But like when it comes to that type of conversation, it's more like, oh, but they don't understand. Like they don't live it. They don't live it. It's all like fake news and stuff, right? So yeah, I don't know, man. It's tough.
It is tough.
I don't know. It's tough.
That bothered me so much is there are videos and pictures and actual people that went through, and it's documented that they were tortured, they were raped, and people like fake news.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It bothered me so much.
Yeah.
But anyways, I think we're there, my man. I enjoyed this conversation with you. Before we close out, do you have any last remark or anything that you would like to say?
Not much. I guess just hopefully you guys could follow at Allan Matudio on Instagram. I have quite a few projects on the way. which is super exciting. You mentioned the cat chain. I'm actually like creating a new version of that.
No way.
Yeah, hopefully it's more. I don't know. I'm brainstorming ways to make it like more reproducible for people. Like I want to be able to share this stuff. I do share my work with close friends and stuff, but like I want to be able to share it with more people.
100%, man.
And
for
at
sure.
that, there's a point now where I'm like balancing out creation versus production. And at the end of the day, I care more about being creative. So there's going to be a time for all of that. But yeah, I'm working on a new version of the Ka chain and looking forward to share that with people.
I cannot wait, man. Again, Allan, thank you so much for coming to the podcast. I
Yeah,
really
thanks
do
for
appreciate
having
it.
me.
For sure. Have a good evening.
Yeah, talk again soon.
Just here. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you again, Allan, for coming on the podcast. I really do appreciate it. Thank you, listeners, for listening. This is Aaron Deliosa for An Immigrant's Life. I'll see you guys later.